Good evening. I'm Greer McGeary, life member of Seahorse Victoria. My guest tonight is Kevin Broughton, a finance director of a grammar school and involved with his church. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much for having me.
An interesting aspect of being involved in things like that is dealing with people growing up and the choices they make for the future sort of thing. A little bit about your growing up and your thoughts and aspirations for your future.
The quick summary is that I was born in Boston in Lincolnshire in England, moved very rapidly to Cardiff in Wales, the capital city of Wales, and so I consider my cultural heritage to be Welsh. Grew up going to a church school all the way through. When I was asked by my careers guidance counsellor what it is I wanted to be, I had three things on my list. The first was to be a speech therapist, the second was to be a dustbin collection person, and the third was to be a priest. And I went on to do a degree in computers, and the money was too good to do anything else, so I stuck with computers.
So something was totally out of those first three objectives. So what was, that's a quick description of, in a timeline sense. So what were those early years like, particularly say at school?
Going to a church school meant that we had two things that we had to do. One was religious studies and one was to learn Welsh. So part of that was being introduced to a very different way of doing things. My mother wasn't naturally religious, but she took me to church so that I could make my own choice around what it was I was going to do.
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
And although my grandmother was Methodist, and the values of all of that prevailed completely. But what I skipped in the timeline was that my mother and father got divorced very early on. So I was basically brought up by my mother and my grandmother. No particular male role models in the household except for my mother's brother, my uncle. And that led me to making my choice as what they call a baptism of the elder. So I made my own vows. I wasn't christened and promises made on my behalf. I actually made my own promises.
Because that's very much that Anabaptist sort of thing from centuries earlier, really, isn't it?
Yep.
That no one should be making that choice for you.
Yep, absolutely.
So in making that choice for you, what sort of influence did that then make on the choices you made from, say, moving from primary into secondary school?
The involvement with the church became a lot more expansive than just going to one Sunday morning service. So I was asked to join the choir, became a member of the choir, thoroughly enjoyed that, and then asked to be what they call an acolyte, which is someone who basically processes with the priest, carries the candle. Well,
it's very similar to the altar boy in the Catholic tradition.
Absolutely, yes. So I ended up being a part of that, and that meant that invariably on a Sunday, that could be 3 services that I was helping with. And a part of that just grew because that sense of community became larger, because it then became the Christmas fairs, it then became the social activities that the church is, not just my church, but the other churches in the area, all got involved for the community's sake.
Have you always sort of been somebody that's really sort of had an ecumenical sort of bent on life, as it were?
Very much so, yeah. The idea that we turn around and frame God in so many different ways, the fact that my way must be the right way has never really entered into my mind. The ability to be able to listen to others and their point of view about what they believe their faith is, or what their belief in God is, stretched to the point that I spent many evenings in the local corner shop with someone who was a Muslim, going through the Quran and him explaining to me aspects of his faith. He didn't try to convert me as such, but he was open for all the conversations around what that involved.
Various parts of the world where there's almost this attitude of my God's better than your God. thing, and it seems to create more conflict than resolution of harmonious living, as it were.
No, which is exactly contra everybody's faith when you look at the faith that they're following.
Right. Yeah.
They're choosing to find the differences and to make those the argument, whereas they forget that 80-90% of it is actually all in common. The values that we share about how we should be living and how we should be treating each other.
Being involved in all of that, sort of particularly through the secondary schooling and into your early adult life, I'll touch upon your studies in university in a moment, but were you just sort of one of the people that came along to attend, or did you put yourself forward to be sort of a leader and be involved in the running of those activities?
No, it was very much just being a part of. I never saw myself as being the person in front. I always felt that I was the supporter, the facilitator or the enabler of certain things being able to happen. But I might be getting ahead of myself, but shortly after college, that's when I had my big breakup with God. He took my grandmother away from me. And as a result of that, I stopped talking to him. And that was 31 years ago.
Somebody that's been so close to you to die and sort of you have to come to terms with that and what it means for the rest of your life.
It was a whole host of things, because he also took my vicar as well. And it just seemed so wrong. I couldn't find a way of being able to carry on talking to him.
Just jumping back there, you've gone to university to study computers and so on and so forth. What was university life in light of all the things you've been doing with your activities with the church?
They continued actively as far as the church was concerned, but I also then got involved very heavily in the community in the youth space. So I started teaching the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme. I became what they call a youth leader, and I was taking groups of other children out to a place called Story Arms in the Brecon Beacons, and we'd do outdoor activities, walking in areas that I had to be qualified to be able to take them. So giving them an experience very much not city-based, but out in the wilds. And the church activities continued. My family and extended family all supported that. So I would do, for example, an early morning service on the Sunday, and then 12 carloads of us would go out to the mountains or to the beach or somewhere to be able to celebrate Sunday afternoon and have a picnic somewhere.
There's a lot of really personal and committed activity along, the church lines and the associated communal activities. With your grandmother dying and the vicar dying, and you said, you stopped talking to God. Is that a way where you totally went off the rails, or did you sort of still keep observing the values that you'd been brought up with?
The values instilled. I believe that's something that is very hard to change. I think experience may edge those values depending on what happens, but the innate belief in love, for lack of a better word, of your fellow mankind is something that is either instilled in you or it isn't. Whether or not I choose to pray, i.e. have a talk to God or not, doesn't change that value set. It doesn't change the meaning of the stories of the Bible that I've chosen to take on board as helping to set those values, or the people around me that exhibit those values as well.
The sense of praying, really, in some aspects, the way I think about it is it's really a form of meditation rather than necessarily connecting with an entity.
Yep.
That sense of that personal meditation then influences you to, you've left university and you've got a job. So how's that sort of playing out?
It was an amusing scenario because I was doing what's called a sandwich degree, which means that you do a couple of years at uni and then you do a year in industry and then you go back to university for another year to finish off the qualification. And I was fortunate enough that the company I worked for during my sandwich year wanted me straight back. So I didn't actually have a break in terms of what was going on. I just went seamlessly straight into work. And that was working for a council, a city council. So that was quite an eye-opener in itself in terms of how that all worked. But where that left me, that was round about the time that my grandmother was taken from me. So what I ended up filling all of my time with was the youth leadership. I became someone that actually ran and helped at 2 different youth centres and 2 very different economic climes, one in a very privileged, affluent area and another in a far less affluent area. In the one, you'd have people coming and boasting about what it is that they'd just got as far as their clothing and bits and pieces. And in the other, you'd have people turning around doing skids outside on cars that they'd borrowed.
When I left school, I went straight into a public service job and then got married and kids. So my sort of getting involved in leadership was through the kids' sort of like sporting things,
Right. Yeah.
Everyone's looking around. Who wants to be president?
Last one to step back.
Basically. So sort of getting involved in that and through service clubs such as Apex and then ultimately Rotary. You've tested the waters of leadership through the youth leadership programs. How does that sort of impact then with your career?
I suppose it's recognising the difference between management and leadership. Doing tasks, which is very much how things are focused in work. You have a role, you have a function, you're doing it. But when you're in front of a group of children and you're able to inspire them to do things, to be able to demonstrate qualities that they then turn around and emulate, there is an amazing reward internally around what that actually gives you a sense of. And it became that. It became very much a matter of recognising that when you can inspire somebody to do something or to achieve something greater than they thought they could possibly achieve on their own, that is a real kickback to yourself in terms of what it is you've been able to do.
Gives you a nice, warm, almost fuzzy feeling in a sense, doesn't it?
It's a good way to talk about it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that somebody's developed into a good, decent human being.
Yeah, having someone 10 years later turn around and get in touch with you and say thank you for what you did is an astounding feeling.
It brings you back to what I was a moment ago mentioning about values, the sense of, you can look at whatever task you do and still put a human face to it or a human value to it that says, well, it's not just beneficial to the company or to me personally, but it's beneficial for a lot more people.
Absolutely. And that, if you like, is part of the validation process that I think we all need. The reason we get into relationships is because we want someone else to validate what it is that we're doing in some shape or form. Because you can achieve loads of things and you'll have your own memories, but it's someone else bearing witness, which I think sort of solidifies all of that.
You've had a career for a while. Did you meet somebody or?
My first girlfriend I had a 10-year relationship with, and somehow at the end of that I was misplaced.
I think I left him somewhere.
It was a culmination of things in terms of places in both of our lives and what was going on. But I also had a car accident. I had someone shunt into the back of my car, which, long story short, ended up with a small operation on the small of my back, and ended up with me getting into quite a dark place, not really knowing what was next. Didn't really know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go.
Did your faith, as it were, help you through that? Or?
No, faith wasn't there at the time. I was still on my breakup period. And it was a combination of friends that reached out to me, which made the difference. There were a group that I was working with in Coventry. They came down. They brought me this teddy bear that was dressed up as a surgeon, which I still have. They made an effort to reach out to me in a way that I had never expected, in terms of them valuing who I was as a human being. And a friend that I'd worked with, who had returned to Australia with her partner, reached out and turned around and said, "Have you ever thought about coming to Australia?" And that started a conversation. That was in December, and by February I was in Australia.
That's a big change for you.
Monstrous change.
So was it direct to Melbourne or Victoria?
Came straight into Melbourne on the basis that I was going to be working on a project for this company, which I had unique experience from because of my previous employer. When I arrived, that job wasn't there anymore. So they ended up sending me to Brisbane to do a piece of work. I did that for a few months and then came back and worked with that company for a year, and then started working for NAB.
I've met you through Toastmasters, but what prompted you to join Toastmasters?
A fear of getting up in front of people and speaking that nobody else seemed to recognise in me. I don't know, it's one of those things when you know you're going to have to do something. I would find myself in the bathroom half an hour beforehand. But it's those responses that are probably always going to be there. And that's what Toastmasters teaches you. It's the experiential model. The more you do it, the more accustomed you get to those feelings and the easier it is to deal with them.
Within a short time, I think you put your hand up to take on leadership roles
Yes.
at the organisational level. So what prompted you to do that?
Conversations with people that turned around and convinced me about the growth that happens as a result and their faith in me to be able to do it. It really was as simple as that. My first role was a role of the area governor back in those days, and it wasn't even going to be one I was going to get credit for because somebody else had already left the role and I wouldn't have been doing a full term in doing it. And it was a great learning experience. And then I did it again. And then the division role. And, eventually I ended up going through the trio and, and I'm just coming out the back end of all of that.
Having taken on that and the learning progression that occurs with taking on those roles, how has that impacted outside, like your work life and further outside the Toastmaster experience?
Very trying as far as a family is concerned. So my wife was very sympathetic to the amount of time that it took to do that work, but she recognised the passion I had for doing it, and so was always exceedingly supportive. But I did recognise that it was very draining. Volunteer leadership roles, people don't really get to understand why you're doing it, the motivation, unless it's something that they've done before. So that proved a challenge. But the greatest learning was around recognising probably more around conflict than about anything else. The being able to motivate people is almost innate in what it is that I do. I find that naturally is something that I want to do, and I'm pretty good at, I believe, from the feedback I get. But dealing with conflict was the really, really hard part. Trying to understand why people come with a particular negative lens to what's going on and how they have a lack of empathy or ability to understand anybody else's perspective. The idea of being able to listen without judgment, and then being able to try and frame that as opposed to constantly creating villain stories that justifies behaviour. That was the hardest part, definitely.
With your work, how did you find developing those skills impact on your work?
It meant listening became an awful lot easier. Being able to run teams and being able to get them to want to do things became an awful lot easier. I have this phrase that often comes back from people, which is, "I think it was my idea." And that to me is the most satisfying response.
Yeah.
When I know that I have done something to try and help that person move to another space, and they can turn around and move and think that it was their idea, really is very satisfying.
You've moved on from the leadership role at Toastmasters. You've embarked on further studies, so
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So 5 years ago this month, my mother passed away, and completely the opposite happened in terms of what happened with my grandmother. And all of a sudden I found myself talking to God again. And as part of that, I got involved in a local church. I was received in such an open way by that congregation and that community that I just felt that that was a place I wanted to be. And then doing that, I ended up getting involved in administration of the diocese that is the umbrella organisation that looks after all the parishes in Gippsland. And part of that then led to doing more theological study. And that took the form of something called EFM, Education for Ministry. And I'm just coming to the end of the 4-year course. I graduate in 2 weeks' time, which basically took the Old Testament and the New Testament, then took the history of Christianity, and they talk about it being 3,000 years, and then talks about growing in faith and morality. And so that's how the 4 years are divided up in terms of going from the base understanding to maturing in your faith. And I also did something called discernment, which is a year of thinking about whether or not ordination is a path that I'd like to go down. And I was deemed what they call an aspirant, which means that I'm someone that is on that path to possibly the diaconate, which is the first step of ordination. And yep, one thing led to another. Now, 2 weeks ago, I started another theological course as well, knowing that the other one was about to end.
You've gone from your early days of having that, I suppose, belief in the community aspect of your religious life and then falling out with it, taking on secular stuff as like with Toastmasters, for instance, and then back into the faith-based. One of the things I enjoyed about Toastmasters was the diversity of people. What I found in, say, some religious things that I've touched upon in life, that it's very narrow in the way they look at the other, as it were. So with all that experience now, how do you feel as though life is going to progress from here?
I position myself in terms of what goes on within the faith community as someone who's on the outer. And I say that because my actual faith practice is almost just on Sundays. And I have this secular life where I'm the finance manager. And it's very hard to recognise that when the majority of faiths and the majority of those communities tend to be led by people that only do that. They're not in the secular world. They are people that have either retired or that is their profession and that's all they do. And it's very hard then when someone has a passion to want to be able to help, to be able to meet at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, to be able to have a meeting about what we're going to do for Christmas carols. And that is a fringe space that I would like to try and find a way of being able to bridge.
It's the diversity of people and the ideas, and you touched upon it about when you're younger and you met in the corner shop with your Muslim friend, and with neither of you really sort of trying to persuade the other to change sides, and just gaining that respect for others.
Yes, no, absolutely. And that was, jumping back again to high school, that was one of the best parts about compulsory scripture, because it was a series of lessons on all the other faiths. So we learnt about the Sikh paths, we learnt about Hinduism, not in a way to say that they were wrong, but in a way to try and understand where they were coming from and where their truth may be.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the phrases that came out over the last couple of years, which seems so contradictory, is that truth is fluid. You know, there are no absolutes in terms of knowledge and understanding, because it's always evolving and growing.
Read a book recently of Simon Winchester called Knowing What We Know. And there's the 4 letters, the D, I, K and W. D being data. From data you develop information, and from information you develop knowledge. But the wisdom part is something that not all of us achieve.
It's that old meme that you see about tomato is a fruit, but you don't put it in a fruit salad. That's
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the wisdom part.
Yeah.
But it's true, and we live in an age now where information is so freely available.
Yeah.
You know, the connection to technology, the ability to ask AI questions and to then be absorbing the information you're getting back and accepting it as truth.
Yeah.
The discernment of information isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
When I learnt to read with my grandmother, we had newspapers, and the newspaper headlines was how I was taught my letters and how to read. But as part of all of that, my grandmother would turn around and say, this particular editor always talks about really good things, and this particular one always makes stuff up and it's nonsense. And immediately you start to learn the influences of the time with regards who you should give credence to. You know, the encyclopedia is a place where you go to for information. You don't go to tabloids, that kind of thing. And we don't have that discernment anymore. If it comes up in the top 10 of Google, then it's gospel. It's absolutely the truth.
It's the difference between information and knowledge, isn't it? You know, the knowledge is derived from information, but knowledge is something that can be passed on. But information is something that's there that you have to derive your own knowledge from. I've always sort of felt that religion comes from a very, in the pre-history days when travel was difficult, and that so it was rules by which the community lived and survived. The God function, in a sense, became the controlling mechanism. But as more and more people come along and things move faster, transport, then now as you say, we've got internet communications and things. What happened now is available to somebody in 1 second time.
A fair observation. Lots of the rules that were there about how to live, like you know, not eating the bottom dwellers of the sea because of you know, they're eating other people's feces, and how many people were getting ill as a result. Absolutely. It was a lot of it was a man-made. They say man-made, but spirit infused or inspired. The Bible itself isn't the only story of God. You go back 60,000 years, and the indigenous population of Australia, they had their God stories.
That's right.
You know,
there's always something bigger than yourself, isn't there?
Absolutely. The Bible is one depiction of a series of stories around, you know, God's relationship with the Israelites and then Jesus' relationship with the rest of the world.
How do you sum up your life then up to now?
One of ever learning and ever growing. I think one of the big things I've learnt as I've gotten older, which I wish I recognised earlier, was about there is only the present. There is only now. There is, you know, that morning when I wake up and I see my daughter getting ready for school and giving her a hug and saying I love her. That's something that has to be done in that moment, every single time. And, you know, you forget about that and you start worrying about tomorrow, and you've lost the plot, I'm afraid.
I think on that extremely positive note, Kevin, thank you for joining me in the conversation.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Greer McGeary. My guest has been Kevin Broughton. Thank you for watching Ben TV.